Imagine two men standing at opposite ends of Japan's long medieval history. One is from the twilight of the 12th century, the other from the structured world of the 18th. Both call themselves warriors. Both are members of the elite samurai class. But to stand them side by side is to witness centuries of transformation in armor, weapons, status, and role. The 12th century man is a mounted archer, wrapped in elaborate Oyoroi armor, a tall helm crowning his head, and a long tachi sword strapped across his back. He wields the yumi, a powerful asymmetrical longbow, and rides into battle issuing bold challenges to his enemies. He does not call himself samurai. That word, rooted in the idea of service, feels beneath him. He is bushi, a warrior. The other, from the Edo period, walks with two swords at his hip, the curved katana and its shorter companion, the wakizaki. His armor is simpler, more utilitarian. He might never have seen battle, not a real one, but he trains daily, as is expected. Unlike his predecessor, he accepts the name samurai. It no longer implies servitude. It signifies rank, honor, and identity in a rigidly ordered society. Between these two men lie centuries of change, political upheaval, civil war, cultural refinement, and the intrusion of new ideas and weapons. Yet something deeper binds them, an enduring code of discipline, loyalty, and self-respect. This is the story of how the samurai evolved, not just as fighters, but as the backbone of Japanese history.
The story of the samurai begins not in a grand castle, but on the edge of the empire. In the 8th and 9th centuries, Japan's imperial court in Kyoto faced a dilemma. Its professional armies of conscripted peasants were expensive and ineffective, especially in the harsh, remote regions of the north, where the indigenous Emishi people resisted imperial control. Rather than continue funding these struggling forces, the court outsourced its military needs. Powerful aristocratic families were granted governorship over provinces and given the task of suppressing local resistance. These nobles began raising their own fighting forces, small, loyal bands of mounted warriors who could respond more quickly and effectively than state militias. These provincial fighters, known as bushi, were skilled in mounted archery, swordsmanship, and guerrilla tactics borrowed from the very people they fought. In time, they developed not only military superiority, but also a distinct identity rooted in clan loyalty and martial honor. The term samurai emerged during this era, but its original meaning was far from prestigious. Derived from the verb saburau, to serve, it initially referred to the retainers and lower-ranking guards of elite families. The true elites still preferred the word bushi, emphasizing their warrior status over their service role. Yet, as the decades passed, the name samurai slowly transformed from a reference to humble attendance into a badge of honor. The rise of these provincial warrior families marked a turning point. No longer was military power tied solely to the imperial center. Authority was now being shaped in the countryside by men who fought, ruled, and carved out their own domains. The stage was set for a new class of leaders to emerge.
By the late 12th century, Japan's political landscape was reaching a breaking point. Two great warrior clans, the Taira and the Minamoto, were locked in a brutal struggle for control of the imperial court. Their war, known as the Genpei War, 1180 to 1185, would not only reshape the country, but also mark the true emergence of the samurai as a ruling class. The Minamoto clan, led by Minamoto no Yoritomo, emerged victorious. Rather than simply bask in the court's favor, Yoritomo did something revolutionary. He established a new government far from Kyoto, in the town of Kamakura. There he took the title Seii Taishogun, or Barbarian Subduing Generalissimo, or simply Shogun. Though the emperor remained the nominal head of state, it was the shogun who now held real power. Thus began the Kamakura Shogunate, 1192 to 1333, a military government run by samurai for samurai. In this new order, samurai were no longer mere warriors. They were administrators, governors, and enforcers of law throughout the provinces. The Kamakura period also brought new challenges. Twice in the 13th century, Japan faced full-scale invasions from the Mongol Empire. In 1274 and 1281, massive fleets carrying Mongol, Chinese, and Korean troops landed on Japanese shores. The samurai, used to ritualized combat in single duels, were stunned by the Mongols' coordinated mass warfare and artillery. But Japan was saved both times by devastating typhoons, later mythologized as kamikaze, or divine winds. Despite their survival, the invasions left the Kamakura regime weakened. Defending the realm had cost a fortune, and the shogunate had little wealth to reward its samurai defenders. Internal unrest grew. By the mid-13th century, the Kamakura government collapsed under its own weight, and a new shogun rose to power, Ashikaga Takauji. The Ashikaga shogunate 1336 to 1573 moved the center of power back to Kyoto. But unlike the Kamakura regime, the Ashikaga system was decentralized. Provincial warlords, or daimyo, were given great autonomy. Samurai clans split and multiplied, forming powerful local dynasties. The state became a patchwork of rival domains, each ruled by its own sword. It was a period of uneasy balance, one that would soon descend into chaos. But in that brief span, the foundation had been laid. The samurai were no longer frontier fighters or hired swords. They were the ruling elite of Japan.
In 1467, a dispute over succession to the shogunate exploded into open war. What began as a political quarrel spiraled into the catastrophic Onin War, a 10-year conflict that destroyed Kyoto, shattered Ashikaga authority, and plunged Japan into more than a century of civil unrest. What followed was the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period, one of the most violent and transformative eras in Japanese history. During the Sengoku period, roughly 1467 to 1600, centralized control vanished. Daimyo, powerful feudal lords, fought relentlessly for land, resources, and supremacy. Samurai became full-time warriors once more, no longer administrators or provincial peacekeepers, but battlefield commanders, castle defenders, and shock troops. New players emerged, ikki leagues of self-governing peasants and monks, zizamurai, lesser rural samurai asserting independence, and militant Buddhist sects such as the Ikko-Ikki, forming fortified temple strongholds across the country. In the chaos, ambition thrived. The man who began to restore order was Oda Nobunaga, a ruthless and innovative daimyo. In the 1560s and 1570s, he broke the power of the militant monks, crushed rival daimyo, and seized Kyoto itself. Nobunaga embraced new methods, notably firearms, and used them to devastating effect. He had no patience for tradition if it stood in his way. After Nobunaga's dramatic death in 1582, his vision was continued by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a former ashigaru, a foot soldier, who had risen to the top through sheer talent and loyalty. Hideyoshi completed the reunification of Japan by 1590 and then turned his attention outward. Seeking glory for the samurai and expansion for Japan, he launched invasions of Korea in the 1590s. These campaigns drained resources, stirred opposition, and ultimately failed, especially after the Korean Admiral Lee Sun-sin decimated Japan's navy with superior ships and cannons. Following Hideyoshi's death, the country again faced a power vacuum. In 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu, a veteran of Nobunaga's campaigns, defeated rival claimants at the Battle of Sekigahara. 15 years later, he crushed the last remnants of opposition and established a new regime, the Tokugawa Shogunate, based in Edo, modern-day Tokyo. The Tokugawa shoguns would rule Japan for more than 250 years. Their regime brought peace, stability, and isolation from the outside world. But it also transformed the samurai, again, from warriors into something new.
With the wars ended and the country unified under Tokugawa rule, the role of the samurai was fundamentally altered. No longer needed on the battlefield, they were folded into a new social structure designed to maintain peace and control. The bushi, once the tip of the spear, became a pillar of administration and moral guidance. Tokugawa society was rigidly hierarchical. At the top stood the emperor, a sacred figurehead, followed by the shogun. Beneath him, the samurai were now a hereditary class of elite retainers, ranking above peasants, artisans, and merchants. Samurai were granted stipends and lived in castle towns, their lives governed by duty to their lords and the state, not the battlefield. With few wars to fight, samurai became bureaucrats, tax collectors, legal officials, and scholars. They were expected to embody discipline, honor, and literacy, traits that reinforced the moral order of Tokugawa Japan. Their swords remained symbols of their authority, but most would never use them in combat. Martial training continued, but primarily as a cultural exercise. Guns, once widely adopted in the Sengoku era, were restricted. Swordsmanship schools flourished, not as preparation for war, but as a form of spiritual discipline. Social mobility, once possible during the chaotic Sengoku years, was now locked. Under the Tokugawa system, a person's class was fixed at birth. The days when a commoner could rise to samurai status, like Hideyoshi, were gone. Even among the samurai, distinctions emerged between high-ranking retainers and low-level warriors with limited income or duties. Women of samurai families were now encouraged to embrace domestic roles. The Onna-Bugeisha, female warriors who had defended castles and joined battles in earlier times, were increasingly pushed to the margins of memory. Though still trained in self-defense, women were discouraged from active military roles under Tokugawa norms of gender and order. The result was a paradox. The samurai became more powerful symbolically, even as their military relevance faded. They were idealized in literature and art, portrayed as paragons of loyalty and honor. Their two swords, the katana and wakizaki, became sacred emblems of their rank, the visible mark of their superiority over commoners. And yet, not all samurai were content with the new arrangement. Some became Ronin, masterless warriors who had lost their lords to death, disgrace, or political restructuring. Unable or unwilling to abandon their identity, many Ronin lived precarious lives, offering their services to the highest bidder or seeking justice on their own terms. Some became mercenaries or even criminals. Others became folk heroes, celebrated for upholding samurai ideals in a world that no longer had a place for them. Under the Tokugawa Shogunate, the samurai had been tamed, made civil servants, moral examples, and relics of a violent past. But even in peace, they carried the burden of their legacy, wearing their swords not just as weapons, but as reminders of who they had once been and who they still believed themselves to be.
As Japan plunged into the violent depths of the Sengoku period, samurai warfare underwent a profound transformation. The age of elegant duels and mounted archers gave way to massed armies, professional infantry, and tactical formations. War was no longer a stage for individual glory. It was now an engine of conquest, logistics, and firepower. In the early years, the ideal of samurai combat still held sway. Mounted warriors charged into battle, drawing their yumi bows and shouting challenges across the field. The romantic image was one of personal valor, one samurai calling out another, arrows exchanged, blades drawn, and honor won or lost in single combat. Foot soldiers supported these duels, using naginata polearms to sweep enemies from their horses or join in the chaotic melee. But the scale of warfare changed. During the Mongol invasions of the 13th century, Japanese warriors were shocked by the Mongols' use of disciplined infantry and volley fire. The invaders, drawn from across Asia, deployed tactics unfamiliar to the samurai: coordinated charges, massed crossbows, and explosives. The Mongols stayed behind their troops rather than leading from the front. To the samurai, this seemed undishonorable, but it was undeniably effective. The Mongol threat faded, but the lesson remained. Personal valor was no match for numbers and discipline. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Japanese daimyo began to embrace the power of ashigaru, lightly armored infantry recruited from peasant ranks. These soldiers, armed with spears and trained in group tactics, became the backbone of Sengoku armies. And then came the gun. In 1543, Portuguese traders arrived in Japan, bringing with them the Tanegashima, a matchlock musket named after the island where it first landed. Nobunaga saw its potential immediately. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, he used volley fire from ranks of ashigaru gunners to shatter the elite cavalry of the Takeda clan. The age of the sword was giving way to the age of powder. Samurai still fought, many as officers or elite troops, but the days of riding into battle to trade arrows with noble enemies were over. Now they led formations of peasants armed with guns, and they themselves often wielded firearms. Swords remained vital in close combat, but battles were now won by timing, positioning, and coordinated volleys, not by the swing of a single blade. Armor changed too. The bulky decorative oyuroi gave way to lighter, more flexible tose-gusuku designs that accommodated the musket's recoil and the needs of marching foot soldiers. Some armors even incorporated European-style iron plating, a nod to both foreign influence and battlefield practicality. And yet, even as the samurai adapted to new weapons and tactics, they never fully let go of their old ideals. Martial discipline, personal courage, and loyalty to one's lord remained at the heart of samurai identity, even if the shape of battle had changed beyond recognition.
While the image of the samurai is overwhelmingly male, history tells a broader story. Throughout Japan's medieval and early modern periods, Women of samurai lineage were not only protectors of the household, some were warriors in their own right. These women, known as Onna-Bugeisha, took up arms to defend castles, fight in rebellions, and uphold the honor of their clans. In the early centuries of samurai rule, especially during the Kamakura and Sengoku periods, women in samurai families were trained in the use of weapons, particularly the naginata, a long polearm well suited for female defenders. Their role was primarily defensive. In times of siege or invasion, women defended the home while their husbands fought elsewhere. But this training was not ceremonial, it was practical, and in many cases, life-saving. One of the most celebrated figures from this tradition is Hangaku Gozen, a woman of the late 12th century who fought alongside her male relatives in a rebellion against the Kamakura Shogunate. Described in chronicles as fierce and beautiful, she led troops from horseback, shot arrows into enemy ranks, and continued fighting even after being wounded. Her bravery became legend, a rare but powerful glimpse into the world of female samurai. Centuries later, during the Sengoku period, samurai women continued to play crucial roles. They managed estates, raised children, and prepared the household for war. In some cases, they took part in combat themselves, especially when enemy forces breached castle walls. The women of Tsuruhime, of Nakano Takeko, and many unnamed others defended their homes with courage equal to any male warrior. But the Tokugawa peace brought change. The Edo period emphasized order, hierarchy, and Confucian values, which placed women firmly in the domestic sphere. Female martial training declined, and the once proud Onna-Bugeisha gradually faded from prominence. Samurai women were still expected to uphold honor and discipline, but through obedience, modesty, and support of their husbands and sons. Nevertheless, the legacy remained. In stories, poems, and prints, female warriors were remembered with reverence and awe. Their defiance of gender norms, their battlefield achievements, and their unshakable loyalty became part of the larger samurai narrative, a reminder that the warrior spirit was not confined to men alone.
Not all samurai served great lords, and not all found peace in the new Tokugawa order. As the Tokugawa Shogunate solidified its grip on power in the 17th century, it implemented strict controls over the warrior class. Daimyo were carefully managed, their domains rotated or reduced. Political intrigue was crushed before it could gain ground. Samurai, once warriors of opportunity and ambition, were locked into a static hierarchy. Those without masters, whether due to war, political shifts, or disgrace, became known as Ronin. Literally meaning wave man, a Ronin was a samurai adrift, a masterless warrior outside the structure of feudal service. In earlier centuries, this might have been a temporary setback. In Tokugawa Japan, it was social exile. The rigid class system had no place for free agents. Some Ronin became hired swords or mercenaries. Others turned to teaching martial arts, bodyguard work, or even banditry. And many simply wandered, proud of their status but unable to find a place in the system. The most famous group of Ronin in Japanese history became legends not because they defied the system, but because they upheld its deepest ideal, loyalty. In 1701, the Lord Asano Naganori was forced to commit seppuku after drawing his sword in the shogun's court. His 47 loyal retainers became Ronin, but instead of fading into dishonor, they waited, planned,
and then avenged their master by killing the court official who had provoked him. Afterward, they turned themselves in and were ordered to commit seppuku, which they did with dignity. The tale of the 47 Ronin resonated deeply with the Japanese public, both then and now. It was a paradox. These men had violated the law, but embodied the very spirit of the samurai: loyalty, sacrifice, and honor. Still, not every Ronin was a hero. As the economy shifted and stipends failed to keep pace with inflation, many lower-ranking samurai and Ronin found themselves impoverished. Some took part in peasant uprisings, others drifted into the underworld. Yet they clung to their identity as samurai, often refusing to take on trades or farming, not out of laziness, but pride. The sword, after all, was their inheritance, even if society had moved on.
What truly made someone a samurai? It wasn't just the sword, the armor, or the title. It was the code. Even before it had a name, the samurai code existed. Passed down through example, local tradition, and clan discipline, it emphasized honor, loyalty, restraint, courage, and readiness to die. Only in the peaceful Tokugawa era did this philosophy gain a formal title: Bushido, the way of the warrior. Bushido wasn't a single document or universal law. It was a cultural ideal shaped by centuries of practice. Early samurai followed unwritten expectations rooted in Confucian, Buddhist, and Shinto values. In the Edo period, writers and scholars such as Yamaga Soko and later Yamamoto Tsunetomo began to codify these values in treatises and manuals. The samurai, now less involved in war, were expected to live exemplary moral lives, models of virtue for the rest of society. Central to this ethos was the concept of honorable death. A true samurai was expected to face death without fear, and in many cases to choose it over disgrace. This ideal manifested most clearly in seppuku, also known as harakiri, the ritual suicide by disembowelment. It was a means to atone, to protest, or to retain personal dignity in the face of defeat. Seppuku had existed since at least the Kamakura period, but by the Edo era, it became highly formalized. The ritual included purification, the writing of a death poem, and often a trusted fellow samurai who would swiftly decapitate the dying man to shorten his suffering. For many, this ultimate act was the ultimate expression of self-control and loyalty. Equally symbolic was the practice of head-taking in battle. Rather than ransoming enemies like in medieval Europe, Japanese warriors sought to present the heads of defeated foes to their generals. These trophies were cleaned, labeled, and often honored, a testament to the victor's skill and courage. But Bushido extended beyond the battlefield. A samurai was expected to be literate, cultured, and thoughtful. Poetry, calligraphy, the tea ceremony, these were not hobbies, but integral to the ideal warrior's education. This blend of martial and aesthetic life set the samurai apart. They were warriors, yes, but also philosophers, statesmen, and artists. This dual identity was perhaps most evident in the moment of death. A samurai facing execution or disgrace did not scream or beg. He composed a final verse. He wrote a death poem.
The final chapters of the samurai story mirror their origins, turbulent, symbolic, and shaped by change beyond their control. For more than 250 years, Japan remained largely closed to the world under Tokugawa rule. But in 1854, that peace was shattered. American warships, led by Commodore Matthew Perry, arrived in Tokyo Bay, demanding trade and diplomacy. Japan could no longer remain isolated. The samurai initially adapted. Some embraced Western arms and tactics. Others joined political movements demanding reform or resistance. But the true upheaval came with the Meiji Restoration of 1868. Reformers overthrew the Tokugawa Shogunate and restored imperial rule under a young emperor, in name at least. The new Meiji government swiftly dismantled the old feudal order. The samurai class was officially abolished. Stipends ended. Swords were banned in public. A new national army, drawn from conscripted commoners, replaced the warrior elite. For many samurai, this was not just a political change. It was an existential blow. Some accepted new roles in government, business, or education. Their literacy and discipline made them valuable in the modernizing state. Others resisted. And none more famously than Saigo Takamori, once a loyal general who led the 1877 Satsuma Rebellion, the last great stand of the samurai. With his army of traditionalist warriors, Saigo fought a losing battle against the modern imperial army. Outgunned and outnumbered, his forces were crushed at the Battle of Shiroyama. Wounded and surrounded, Saigo took his own life by seppuku, the final echo of the old samurai code. With his death, the age of the samurai ended, not with a law, but with a gesture, a sword drawn not in victory, but in honor. Yet even in defeat, the samurai spirit endured. It survived in literature, in memory, and in modern institutions. Bushido influenced military codes, martial arts, and even business ethics in 20th century Japan. The image of the stoic, noble warrior, disciplined, loyal, and refined, remained central to Japanese identity. The samurai disappeared from the battlefield, but they never vanished from history.